We eventually left Pushkar, bound next for Udaipur, on the shores of Lake Pichola. Founded in 1568 by the Maharana, or King, Uday Singh, the architectural style of its buildings and palace reflect a Mughal flair for elegance. Udaipur may look familiar to movie buffs, as it was the setting for the James Bond film Octopussy, which many of the restaurants show very worn versions of nightly. Udaipur is a very picturesque city and a great place to wander. Mostly we walked around the area, but tired feet called for alternate forms of transportation. A lift in this man's buggy was unique, but we felt awful for his emaciated horse. Perhaps he'd get some extra feed at the end of the day. As in most places, we found ourselves sitting and watching daily life. Watching the locals on the dobi or laundry ghats was something Siobhan and I did quite often, especially in the evening. Our presence, nor theirs, seemed to deter the birds from foraging for food. The dogs were on the prowl too. Stray dogs literally abound in India. Some are friendly, and some are shy, but all are curious. I think they could tell Siobhan was a soft touch for a handout. A ride taxiwalas in Udaipur are anxious to give is up to the Monsoon Palace for the sunset. You might even say, over-anxious. Previously used by the local Maharaja to escape the heat of the dry season, the palace now stands deserted. After a wild ride there, we were able to relax. Once again, being in a quiet, peaceful setting was very welcome. And what tremendous views we had over the surrounding valleys. All too soon, the drivers gathered to leave. After getting back to town and our hotel, we finished our day with dinner on the roof, enjoying the changing sky over the city and the nightly flight of the bats. Departing Udaipur, we were heading to the hill station of Mount Abu. Indian buses come in many levels of comfort, the major difference being air conditioning, something we stayed away from because we wanted to get acclimated to the heat. And besides that, you usually froze. It was far more pleasant sweating. Though unforeseen obstacles slowed things down periodically, the buses in India did make good time. Bus rides are usually long, bumpy, and uncomfortable, but they're always visually entertaining. The journey was usually the best part of getting somewhere. After having a quick stop for a sociable chat, our driver soon carried on. As we ascended, you could feel a slight drop in temperature, though only a bit. It was appreciated all the same. After arriving, we hunted down an acceptable room. It wasn't bad at all. It had all the modern conveniences, and we were able to do some laundry as well. There was one hitch to this, the blaring music that accompanied the dawn, for we found there was an army barracks across the road. We were surprised to learn Mount Abu is a popular destination for Indian honeymooners. That was easily understood, with its fairy tale-like location up in the clouds. The relatively cool mountain air made walking about quite comfortable, whether around the lake or by the edge of the plateau. The fog seemed to be in a race to conceal every last bit of landscape. It wasn't fully appreciated until it began to clear, when the full intensity of the sun was beating on you. Now, that did seem to bring out at least one grateful local. We stayed in Mount Abu 3 or 4 days, wandering, visiting temples, and enjoying the somewhat cooler climate. Our next destination was to be an extreme change from Mount Abu's moderate temperatures. We undertook a 12-hour bus journey via Udaipur to the city of Jaisalmer in the Thar Desert of western India. Jaisalmer came into its own because of its strategic position on the trade route between India and Central Asia. Its fort, built in 1156 by Rawal Jaisal, is still home to a sizable portion of the population. Our accommodation had exceptional views of the fort, city, and surrounding desert. It was mesmerizing. During our stay here, the temperature would reach close to 45 Celsius, or 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The street life down below was entertaining, with a cricket match going on. As I sat, I began to notice the cows standing about, waiting for something, perhaps a handout. It turned out these somewhat domesticated animals were coming home. Milking time was at hand. Nasir, the manager of our hotel, was very friendly and quite interested in the review of his establishment in our guidebook. Some of Jaisalmer's most beautiful buildings are the Havlis, some the former residence of wealthy merchants. Today, they're vacant, home only to numerous bats. With impressive craftsmanship, they're made from the same sandstone used to build the rest of the city, and are a tribute to the artisans that made them. We wandered through, trying to imagine what it might have been like to have lived here. How had they been decorated? What was daily life like? Our imaginations raced. While in Jaisalmer, Siobhan and I were determined to go on a camel safari. A fellow traveler from Glasgow, Scotland, Anne Clare, also signed on. By jeep, we were to be taken to our starting point via the oasis of Badabag. With Jaisalmer rising out of the desert behind us, we had a look around. This was a cemetery or mausoleum of sorts. The ornate centipaths holding the ashes of wealthy merchants. There seemed to have been quite a few wealthy sorts over the years. An hour more on the road brought us 70 kilometers from the Pakistani border, where we reached our destination, the Sam Sand Dunes. We were to have dinner here and spend the night. First, though, we took a walk on the dunes. Upon gaining a vantage point, we surveyed our surroundings. It was a beautiful place, where you'd easily lose yourself gazing out over the vastness of the desert. What we didn't know was that it would be the last night for perhaps a week, that we wouldn't be racked with pain from being in the saddle. We arose with the dawn to have breakfast and meet our guides and camels. Raju was to be my camel. As the guides did a last check of provisions, he and I sized each other up. He was used to this routine, and, I'd find, knew the trail well. After getting comfortable with our mounts, enjoying the scenery became easier. But let's not confuse getting comfortable with being comfortable. Learning commands was the easy part. Siobhan's camel, Babalu, was eager to sample all the vegetation and was a bit free-spirited, as she soon found out. We rode on for about 4 hours or so, stopping for lunch about 11 a.m. to escape the stifling midday heat. Our guides unpacked and hobbled the camels so they wouldn't wander far. Now Babalu could get his fill. We asked to help, but were told to sit and rest in the shade as they set about making lunch. A tasty meal of curried vegetables, rice, and chapatis, and unleavened flat bread. Since we'd only had a light breakfast, the smells of their cooking was quite enticing. And about this time, a fellow appeared out of the bush, selling sodas and cookies. Where he came from was unknown to us, but he stayed for some food. We bought a pack of cookies, and he was on his way. After eating, we all lounged in the shade, passing time until the heat wasn't so intense. Later, the camels were gathered, and we proceeded on, eventually setting up camp next to the ruins of Jetka, a long deserted village. The arrival of Mr. Bissa, the owner of the safari business, was a welcome one, for he was bringing dinner, which his mother prepares for his guests. Mr. Bissa, also known as Mr. Desert, is a bit of a celebrity in these parts. He was the model for a national cigarette brand. He told us the story of why Jetka, a wealthy village on the Silk Route, was abandoned 250 years ago. Defying the Maharaja of Jaisalmer, who wanted to marry his daughter, a merchant and his family fled from Jetka. Fearing his ensuing wrath, the other villagers left as well.
Very rich people, they had camel cars, ox cars, they took all the valuable things, and they went that night far from here. Next day he came, he saw nothing here. And they hate name of Jaisalmer, and when they left from here they say, we will never drink water from Jaisalmer. and they send message to other village because the few nearby many other village. In that village, people live who belong from that caste. When they heard this story, they also left. Even we have 84 village like that.
Wow.
84 village. Some village 10 house, some village 20 house, some village 5 house, some village just 1 house belong from that caste. When they heard this story, they also left. Now they have empty house in many village. People don't live there.
After a hard night's sleep on the ground, we had breakfast and watched an industrious dung beetle make off with the prize. It was terrific to encounter such curious creatures I'd only seen previously on nature programs. With each new discovery or experience, no matter the size, it surely enriched the travel experience. We got back on the trail for a few hours, enjoying the desert solitude and occasionally hearing the far-off tinkle of a goat's bell. Once stopped, we again had lunch in the welcome shade of a tree. This time, we were visited by a young girl looking for plastic water bottles. She too stayed for lunch. Marveling at our surroundings, we reminisced about the past day's events and commented on how fortunate we were to be here.
My camel Roger is just happy enough, sitting, relaxing, chewing his cud.
Talk soon drifted to where we'd go next, after Jaisalmer. Arriving back in the city that evening, excitement was in the air. A cow had given birth on the street below our newfound accommodation.
Oh, look at it. He's good now. Looks okay. You want to look?
The lady taking care of the cow seemed quite pleased with the new calf, as did the neighborhood children. After a few more days, we left Jaisalmer, making our way north now by bus to the city of Bikaner. We wanted to see the Karni Mata temple in nearby Deshnok, a temple inhabited by rats that are believed to be the future incarnations of holy men. We felt a bit anxious, not knowing what to expect with regards to numbers. We figured to be knee-deep in the little buggers, but were surprised to find the population rather small. We were told most go inside the cool temple walls to escape the midday heat.
Oh, sleepy little rat.
The rest sleep where they can.
Look at it.
Worshippers bring prasad, an offering of food for the future sadhus and mystics. After the rats have had their share, the devout themselves eat some of their offering. The belief being that prasad that has been salivated on by the rats will bring one good luck. To see a white rat is also said to bring good luck. We were content to try and find some in this fashion. As you can imagine, it smelled like a load of rats lived here. And in India, you learn to get used to both good and bad smells. The place was an olfactory paradise of sorts. Probably the first thing we'd notice when we left the country was a lack of smells. In the temple, footwear wasn't allowed, and that took a bit of getting used to, with the rats scurrying over your feet and the idea of what you were treading on. It was funny to see the rats pampered as they were, and interesting to note that the colony allows no outside rats to enter their privileged ranks. Only staying for a couple of nights in Bikaner, We proceeded north to Amritsar in the Punjab state, going the long way by rail. In Amritsar, we were to visit the Golden Temple, the holiest shrine of the Sikh religion. Destroyed in 1761 and rebuilt in 1764, it wasn't until 1802, when re-roofed with gilded copper plates, that it gained its current name. To enter, you had to check your shoes, wash your feet, and don a head wrap from a basket out front. We found it to be a very tranquil and interesting place. The organ music and scripture reading floating throughout the complex on the humid air. We spent some hours wandering in and out of the various buildings and watching the devout worship and wash in the holy waters of the tank surrounding the temple. As a pilgrimage site for Sikhs, a great many people come from all over India and beyond to worship. Continuing on our way, we began our ascent into the mountainous region, which is northern India. Dharamsala, or more specifically, McLeod Ganj, is our destination. We travel on local buses this time. The journey would take 6 hours in 4 buses. We had tight connections all the way. We didn't wait for more than 5 minutes, actually running from one to catch the next. We got the last free spots, the zero-gravity seats. Situated beyond the rear axle, we were launched several times, Siobhan, myself, our packs, everything. Twice I managed to headbutt the roof. The monsoon rains were catching up to us now, and the mountains would prove to be no place to escape them. A former hill station of the British, they came here to escape the heat of the plains in the months leading up to the monsoon season. It's now home to the Tibetan Government in exile, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and a large community of Tibetan refugees. Soon after arriving, you could sense something was different. Life's pace was slower here. Tibetan people are friendly and personable, and quick with a hello or smile. They've got wonderful food too. Momo soup became a favorite because of the damp climate. It was definitely soup weather. We'd planned only to stay maybe 5 days or so, but were captivated by the natural beauty of the mountains and the friendliness of the people. In addition, with the return of the Dalai Lama from a trip abroad, there was a possibility of a public audience with His Holiness. We ended up staying 2 weeks in the end. It's nice to stay in one place for a while. You get to really observe life and notice its subtle changes. The abundant wildlife was never far. The monkeys being accustomed enough to people, they let you get fairly close. On one occasion, I witnessed their boldness when a group mugged a lady of her shopping. This one didn't seem to associate with that crowd. There was a spiritual feel to the place, with prayer flags hanging in the trees, their words carried by the wind. Weather permitting, our days were spent hiking in the surrounding hillsides. This waterfall was a good walk. A vendor at the top ready with a hot glass of sweet milky tea. Say you One day we came upon these kids. They got a kick out of my camera and really enjoyed seeing the pictures I was taking. Age didn't really matter. Their mom was just as curious and interested. Whenever I took pictures of anyone, I'd always show them afterwards. You couldn't help but respect the native people and the rugged life they led. We met this Indian gentleman on our way back down. He was very gracious and invited us back to his house for tea. Siobhan and I met his family and chatted a while, his daughter translating, as she was the only one who spoke English. We felt very lucky and honored to be invited to his home. It was one of those experiences that are so unique and special that the memory of it remains fresh. We asked what the dog's name was. They said they didn't know. He'd come with us. And he tagged along again when we left.